Today, the State Department released new details regarding China's surveillance balloon program, declassifying information that indicates sophisticated efforts to spy on more than 40 countries across 5 continents. The agency also expressed confidence the balloon's manufacturer had direct commercial ties to the Chinese military. What conclusions can we draw from the State Department going so public with this information, a week removed from the Biden administration's previous attempts to downplay the entire affair? I mean, again, in the State of the Union address on Monday night, the president, there was one sentence regarding this. The entire nation was focused on this for a week, and he didn't even talk about it. Joining me now to talk about this is the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, Gordon Chang. You can follow him on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much, Tony.
All right, tell us what you know about today's revelations from the State Department.
Well, the State Department said that China has a fleet of balloons. They have surveilled countries in 5 continents, more than 40 countries. This is something that China watchers have known, but obviously the Pentagon was not alive to it because there were balloon intrusions, for instance, during the Trump administration, which they were unaware of. And I think that they have become aware of it when they look back through all of the data that they have collected. There were a lot of things that they sloughed off, which they didn't understand at the time, but now they realize the most likely explanation are Chinese surveillance balloons.
Well, China has demanded the return of the remains of their balloon. I'm assuming that we're going to be able to find out a lot more about their program by analyzing what we're able to recover.
Yes, we'll find out what that surveillance package under the balloon actually was able to find. But also, I think that we're hearing indications that there were U.S. components in the Chinese surveillance package. And that could very well mean that U.S. parties get prosecuted for selling sensitive materials that could not be sold to China. So there's going to be a lot that we're going to learn. And it's not just Chinese villains. It's perhaps American villains as well.
Well, we've seen that already when it comes to the surveillance that's going on in the country of China of like the Uyghurs and others that has been facilitated by U.S. companies. Of course, that's now being exported to other countries as well, even coming back to the United States. Gordon, this is obviously negligence on behalf of our military, but could it be that they were not expecting a lower tech surveillance system of balloons and they were looking for things in space as opposed to things in the sky?
Yes, and I think the Pentagon is really not of a mindset to deal with China. They just don't have the right framework for thinking about this. And so you have these threats.
Yes.
You know, we heard the NORAD commander, General Van Herk, say, well, look, yeah, we detected it, but we didn't do anything about it. And the question is, why not? Either the general just did not understand the nature of this Chinese balloon, or his rules of engagement were clearly insufficient to protect the American homeland. Or maybe both.
Extremely important point. Even going to the president's statement in his State of the Union address about, you know, we don't want conflict, we're just competitors. That puts us on the wrong footing with China. In fact, I'm sure you've commented on it, the memo that came from the 4-star general in the Air Force saying that we could be at war with China and by 2025, and people were quick to dismiss that. So anyone that's in the military trying to put us in that right footing is dismissed and marginalized.
Yes, and this is the president's fault. For instance, as you point out, in the State of the Union, he made no direct reference to the balloon incident. There was one sentence which was indirect in his interview with Judy Woodruff. He laughed off the entire thing. And today, CNN reported that Biden administration officials actually testified before a closed session of a congressional hearing that they did not want to shoot down the balloon at an early stage when they could have done so over uninhabited territory because they were afraid of China's reaction. I mean, they were intimidated from defending the U.S. on our own territory. I mean, this is just outrageous. And that's really the president's fault because he sets the tone on China. He won't even call China an adversary. And I think that they're more than just an adversary. They're an enemy because that's the way they think of us.
So let me ask you this question, Gordon Chang. From the Chinese perspective, how do they interpret what has unfolded here in the United States?
There are a couple of alternative explanations for why China authorized this balloon flight. One of them is that the Chinese military has now become so politically powerful that they can do what they want, and they are very much want to show the United States that we're done. We're no longer a power. Xi Jinping, another explanation would be that he did this to basically intimidate us, to show the world that the U.S. is incapable of defending itself, and so therefore they should ditch the U.S. and should obey China. There are a number of ways we can look at this, but none of them are good. And what this really says is that there is real turmoil at the top of the Communist Party, and that the hardliners, if anybody is in charge, they are.
I would have to imagine under any circumstance, when you look at what occurred, yes, we shot down the balloon after it came across the entire country. And then in the president's speech, he did not display any anger or righteous indignation against China for breaching our borders and our airspace and snooping on America. He was dismissive of it at best. This has to embolden communist China.
Yes, it does. And the way it does, especially because, we had the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin tried to establish a communication link with the defense minister in China. And what that does, and we don't realize it, we think it's sort of responsible. We think of restraint as being the right course of action. But the Chinese view it as weakness.
Yeah.
And essentially what we have been doing, and not just with this incident, but over the course of decades. So there's a lot of presidents responsible. What we have done is we've emboldened the worst elements in the Chinese political system by showing everybody else that belligerence works. The Chinese engage in provocative conduct, and we don't impose costs. And everybody then thinks, well, why don't we engage in something even more belligerent because we're going to get away with it? And in fact, China has gotten away with it. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives in the Oval Office, China has gotten the better of us at every turn. So, this should not be a surprise to the American people. And we obviously need to change course immediately.
Yeah, I mean, they're just going to keep probing and see how far they can push. And of course, we know, going back to comments from General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, after the election, he wrote in his, he made statements that, he called his Chinese counterpart to assure him that if Donald Trump was going to do anything, he would let them know. That, to me, is a real key point in the problem we have, that we have a military that is interacting with the Chinese, wanting to give them advance warning of actions we might take.
Yeah, the word treason comes to mind. The United States has a constitutional mechanism for dealing with a commander-in-chief who is not capable. And if General Milley thought that President Trump was not competent to serve as commander-in-chief, he should have tried to invoke the 25th Amendment. But what he decided to do was to go around and talk to our enemy. And he should have been fired for that.
Yeah. Gordon Chang, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate you staying focused on this issue.
Thank you so much, Tony, and stay safe.